Good Wednesday afternoon. Thanks for being with us on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Chris Zarabski. New today, border czar Tom Homan says 700 immigration agents are leaving Minnesota today. That's after a, quote, unprecedented number of county jails that are now working with the feds to transfer inmates with ICE detainers into ICE custody.
We currently have an unprecedented number of counties communicating with us now and allowing ICE to take custody of illegal aliens before they hit the streets. Unprecedented cooperation. And I'll say it again. This is efficient, requires only 1 or 2 officers to assume custody of a criminal alien target rather than 8 or 10 officers going into the community and arresting that public safety threat. This frees up more officers to arrest or remove criminal aliens. More officers taking custody of criminal aliens directly from the jails means less officers on the street doing criminal operations. This is smart law enforcement.
At the same time, Homan said a complete drawdown will depend on continued cooperation and the decrease of, quote, violence, rhetoric, and attacks against ICE and Border Patrol. This afternoon, Minnesota school districts and educators are suing the Department of Homeland Security, trying to block DHS and ICE operations in or near public schools. The plaintiffs argue that a recent rollback of protections for, quote, sensitive locations and expanded enforcement under Operation Metro Surge have disrupted education. They say it's frightened families and driven students out of classrooms. They allege enforcement activity in and around schools has led to canceled activities and sharp attendance drops, sometimes by nearly 1/3, particularly affecting multilingual student populations. Governor Tim Walz also pressing the federal government to stop immigration enforcement at schools. He sent a letter to Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem yesterday, demanding to know how many Minnesota children have been detained by immigration authorities. He's also asking where those children are being held. This comes as the White House border czar, Tom Homan, who you just heard from, has said that agents could enter schools if they believe there's a serious public safety threat. Just in, local leaders and community activists speaking out against Children's Minnesota, the hospital, and its decision to pause gender-affirming care services.
Children's Minnesota is one of a handful of pediatric hospitals across the country facing relentless federal intimidation, including threats of investigation, revoked funding, and even potential civil or criminal penalties. Their decision that was announced yesterday to pause certain gender-affirming care services is a direct result of these escalating federal campaign attacks to punish hospitals for doing exactly what every hospital should be doing, and that is providing evidence-based, life-saving care to patients and families. Deeply disappointed and gutted by this decision, nonetheless, and it has sent shockwaves across our state and across the country.
It comes after the hospital said it will stop prescribing puberty-suppressing medications and hormones for patients under 18 starting February 27th. Children says that they made the decision after seeing an increase in federal actions against hospitals that provide this type of care. The hospital's Gender Health Center is not closed and will still keep providing mental health care and medical and non-medical guidance for patients. One of the stories sparking huge outrage across the country is around 5-year-old Liam Ramos. He and his father returned home this past Sunday. Now we're learning another student from the same school district is expected to be released from ICE custody as well. 4th grader Elizabeth Zuna Casaguano and her mother, who does have a final order of removal, according to the Department of Homeland Security, were picked up by ICE on their way to school January 6th. Superintendent Zanya Stenvik tells KARE 11 it's not clear when or if they will return to Minnesota. Stenvik goes on to say that they're very concerned about the other students and families in their district being held in detention centers. Well, today we're getting a first-hand account of the conditions inside the Whipple building. That's the federal building that is detaining immigrants right now. Those immigrant operations in the Twin Cities are headquartered there, and that's where detained people are taken, as I said. Several Minnesota lawmakers got to visit that center after a group of representatives were initially denied access last month. Gordon Severson talked to Kelly Morrison and Tina Smith about the treatment of detainees that they call inhumane.
Every day, protesters gather outside the Whipple building near historic Fort Snelling.
Come and talk to us.
But besides detainees and federal agents, few people have gone beyond this line to see what's inside these walls.
What I saw in Whipple was incredibly disturbing.
Minnesota Congresswoman Kelly Morrison toured the Whipple building over the weekend, and she was surprised by the conditions.
There are people shackled in very cold cells, no beds, no blankets, minimal food.
Morrison says the detention area was mostly made of concrete floors, concrete walls, and concrete benches. She says there were single rooms and larger rooms that can hold upwards of 30 people. She spoke with 2 detainees while she was there, including a woman who was trying to contact her daughter.
She was alone, her legs were shackled. She looked very distraught. And she told me that she and her husband had been taken that morning and their 7-year-old daughter had been left behind with a friend. And she was frantic, wanting to get in touch with her daughter. She had not been able to make a phone call yet.
Morrison says she was also concerned that during her visit, there wasn't a single medical professional inside the facility. She was told that DHS believes it's an acceptable practice because Whipple is considered a temporary holding facility and not a true detention center.
So this agent explained to me that once they're technically detained, which they are when they get to Texas, I guess, then they get medical care that they may need. Then it sort of seemed like their rights kicked in.
It is just completely inhumane.
Senator Tina Smith also toured the facility over the weekend, and she too is concerned that detainees may not receive proper medical care because she argues a lot of them are staying at the facility longer than just a few hours.
We know that that's not the case. There have been many, many reports to our office that folks have been there for a long time. And in fact, we spoke to people who'd been there for, 12, 14, even 24 hours.
Both Smith and Morrison agree that during their visits, they saw around 30 detainees. And both women argue that they likely didn't see the true reality of what's happening inside the facility, because they say they both had to give more than a week's notice to get inside.
When we see what some of these agents are willing to do in front of cameras, we all have to worry what they'd be willing to do behind closed doors. And since they had 8 days notice before my visit, I'm deeply concerned.
Gordon Severson reporting there. We reached out to Homeland Security to get their side on the story, on the conditions inside the Whipple building. We have not received a reply. Morrison says the agency created a new policy last month that states members of Congress must give a 7-day notice before they can visit a facility. Morrison and 12 other representatives sued DHS over that policy, and a judge recently granted a temporary restraining order that will temporarily give lawmakers access to that facility. Developing today, former prosecutors are urging the DOJ to allow an independent state and local investigation into Renee Good and Alex Preddy's deaths. More than 300 former federal prosecutors sent a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi and congressional leadership calling for the government to follow bipartisan law enforcement norms. They wrote that if the department believes, quote, the actions of the involved officers were lawful and justified, there should be no objection to independent state review, end quote. This comes after federal authorities blocked the BCA, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension in the state of Minnesota, and state investigators from accessing crime scenes of both shootings. This afternoon, the government is struggling to keep up with habeas corpus cases. In a shocking hearing, and I mean shocking in every way, in federal court yesterday, Judge Jerry Blackwell grilled the government about why his orders were being ignored in 5 specific cases. The Homeland Security attorney told the court that the government lawyers simply can't keep up. A Homeland Security attorney told Blackwell during the hearing, quote, the system sucks, this job sucks, end quote, and added they're trying to get what the judge needs. She went on to say she wishes that she would be held in contempt of court so she could get 24 hours of sleep. We are live in D.C. this afternoon, a day after President Trump signed a spending package ending the partial government shutdown. The bill will fund the government through September, but it creates another funding issue for Homeland Security. Now lawmakers have less than 2 weeks to work out a deal on changes to DHS. Democrats want to see reforms, including stricter rules around warrants and requiring agents to remove their masks. However, some leaders say that they're not sure the two parties can reach an agreement.
ICE and the Department of Homeland Security need to dramatically change.
And so if the Democrats want to throw out these ridiculous proposals that make it harder for ICE to do their job, that's just not going to happen.
DHS funding now expires February 13th. Back in Minnesota, city officials say ICE's operation is having a devastating effect on the Minneapolis economy. They say the city's losing $10 to $20 million every week. Jennifer Hoff reports.
A commercial artery across Minneapolis, Lake Street is a melting pot of cultures, hit especially hard by ICE's Operation Metro Surge, including Colonial Market. Kahola Clydesdale,
for sure,
helped open 2 years ago.
Some people is very scared and afraid.
From a dramatic drop in foot traffic and revenue to nearly a dozen of the small stores inside that already closed.
We got messages of people that we don't have money for groceries, and that's what we are making sure we're going to have that money for them.
A grassroots effort to address what city leaders say is an economic emergency, starting as soon as those agents arrived the beginning of December.
We knew this was going to be pretty brutal.
Eric Hansen leads the city's economic development and estimates it's losing upwards of $20 million every week. Lake Street accounting for a third of that alone. An area already rebuilt after the unrest following George Floyd's murder and the pandemic. A $350 million loss then that in part was funded by the federal government.
I'd like to quantify it as like we have a $100 problem and the city probably has a nickel or a dime, maybe a quarter to put towards that problem. But we had a federal partner in the recovery, and I'm worried and concerned that we won't have that partner.
A ripple effect no matter where you live.
We're all part of the same state. We're all part of the same economy.
There are signs that it's reeling, but none when it might make a comeback as people still try to cushion the crisis.
Actually, we feel empowered that we are here to help.
Jennifer Hoff reporting there. New today, a man convicted of trying to kill President Donald Trump on a Florida golf course sentenced to life in prison. Ryan Ruth's name gained recognition after he aimed a rifle through shrubbery at Trump's West Palm Beach Country Club. He was quickly noticed and shot at by a Secret Service agent before being taken into custody. He was sentenced in the same courtroom where back in September, he caused chaos attempting to stab himself shortly after jurors found him guilty of all counts. Two other headlines now. NBC Sports says that Today Show host Savannah Guthrie will not travel to Italy for the Olympics as the search continues for her mother, who appears to have been kidnapped from her home in Arizona. TMZ reported yesterday that they received an unverified ransom note related to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. Sheriff's officials say it's aware of reports of a note and is taking all leads seriously. They also say it appears that she was taken against her will and left vital life-saving medicines behind. Guthrie's family reported her missing after she didn't attend church Sunday morning. The sheriff says DNA evidence from the scene didn't offer any possible leads to a suspect. Stick with us, we got more news and weather coming up after the break.